Four candidates remain as the Denver Broncos search for their new general manager after John Elway announced his decision to relinquish the reins of that position, which he held for the last decade. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another edition of Broncos Beat. I'm Alexis Perry, joined today by James Palmer from the NFL Network, Cecil Lammey from 104.3 The Fan, and Andrew Mason from DNVR. Guys, there is so much to discuss in regards to the open GM position, which as of the time of filming today has not yet been filled. So we will delve even deeper into the candidates and what this new hire will mean for the future of this franchise here in just a little bit. But first, this is a unique year given just how many GM positions are open. So as Joe Ellis, John Elway, and Vic Fangio interview these candidates are also interviewing them. So James, if you were in the room helping to pitch this organization to these contenders, what would you say makes this job in Denver so appealing?
Well, Alexis, Cecil knows this. I am usually the negative guy on this show, so I will start off by saying this is not the number one job in the NFL. And I think all of us can agree with that, right, of the openings at the general manager spot. But I will flip it to what is appealing. To me, the first thing that jumps out is you don't have to hire a head coach. Now, that does sound kind of odd because you can look at that from a couple of different angles. But to me, that is a major decision you have to make at the beginning of your reign as any general manager getting hired. And that is stuck to you. If that doesn't work, that is tied to you as one of your first major decisions and already a strike against you if things go south. This is a head coach that is already in place. You did not make that decision. I think, Cecil, that gives you a little bit of extra time, right, at what you're trying to build because you're starting in this situation. You could look at it as a positive and a negative, but to me, if you want to look at it with the young core players, you're not in cap hell, and at the same time, you're not tied to the head coach in terms of a big decision right off the bat. That gives me a little bit of appeal if I'm applying for this job.
Yeah, it's that young core of talent that I would look to. You're right about the coaching staff. It can be seen either way, but I like the young core of players that you can build around. So it would be interesting to look at this team and go, well, wait a second, I want to add to that young talent. That's what a GM will be doing through the draft and through free agency. But the Broncos have a better core than maybe national people recognize. If you're local, if you're in depth in this roster, like we all are, then you know that this team has some quality talent.
Yeah, and that young core means you've got more options, even going into this draft, for example. You look at the roster, there aren't many huge holes. You go back, say, 3 years ago, this roster was pockmarked with holes all over the place. It's not the case anymore. So if you are a GM taking this, you look at the scenario and say, okay, I can actually consider moving up in this draft, making a deal if I feel like I need to get into the top 5 because I could sacrifice additional draft capital to move up because so many of the holes on this roster are filled. That, I think, is number one right there as for why this is a good job.
And Alexis, one other point would be if you are a Drew Lock fan applying for this job, you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, which is a monster advantage in the NFL.
Well, like you guys know, there is so much more to being a GM in today's NFL than just signing and releasing players. So what are some of those responsibilities of the modern day GM, and what are some of the traits the Broncos should be looking for?
Well, when you look at everybody who applies for general manager positions, Alexis, it's really coming from 3 categories, right, guys? It's the scouting world, it's the coaching world, and kind of those salary cap guys in that world. That's about it. And the NFL and people around the league say this is probably the least progressive in looking outside the box at the general manager spot out of all the 4 major sports. The other sports have gone outside and looked at some different people in the world of business or finance or Fortune 500 companies to run this job. And they've done that because there is a lot more than just the draft, free agency, evaluating players, and especially, I think, in the Broncos organization with what's above you, Cecil, and the uncertainty there. I think you need to get somebody that has a lot of those qualities of bringing the best out of people in other aspects of this business, in other aspects of the organization. You're going to need to wear a lot of hats to lead this group out of a funk that they are in right now. I think the traits away from evaluating talent is actually very valued in this specific job.
Yeah, and with the Denver Broncos and with any general manager position, as we all know, it's about relationships. You're in the relationship business. You have to have an eye for talent. We'll get to all the candidates and their eyes for talent. And that is something that I think is natural. It's not learned skill. No matter how much film you watch, you either have it or you don't. So the Broncos have to find that man with the eye for talent, but then the eye for building and maintaining relationships with agents, with players, and the most important relationship with the head coach. You must be in simpatico. You must be together,
Ooh,
combined,
I like
unified, whatever word you want to use. General manager and head coach now are tandems. They're not individuals. And the Broncos need to find the best person to work with Vic Fangio.
And the other thing that's kind of in play here is, of course, the fact that Matt Russell is retiring and he was John Elway's right-hand person. So you're talking about a scenario where you've effectively got two positions to fill here over the next few months, probably. And let's say that your GM is more of that big picture type of person who's focused on the relationship with the coach, on the relationship with agents and so forth. Then that right hand, that director of pro personnel or whatever title you put on that number two, that may be the person for whom you want to have more in the scouting area and have that be his or her focus. Whereas for the GM, they can take on those big picture responsibilities. So, it's an evolving job, but you can probably say that the GM's probably never been more important than it is right now in terms of prominence around the league.
Well, guys, no matter who gets the job, the Broncos are going to feel very different without number 7 making these big personnel decisions. So, James, quickly before we go to break, what do you think the biggest difference will be between Elway and the new hire?
Well, I think the first one, Alexis, is a new set of eyes, someone that's not emotionally attached or has been watching these players for a long time. That comes into decisions for Justin Simmons and Von Miller specifically. And then also, I think they are missing. John Elway is a tremendous negotiator. And in his world of business and that background, he has been able to negotiate and be very firm in a lot of instances. And his name carries a lot of water. So that does change a little bit of the dynamic in terms of free agency.